Hi, my name is Makgati, and I am actually trained as a psychotherapist that specializes in the expressive arts therapies. And I have been in the field of leadership development, particularly focusing on personal development and mastery. Sure, maybe for over 20 years. And it's a big passion of mine. It actually feels more like a passion. It feels more like purpose, like mission. And the mission being that I have a deep calling inside of me to assist us human beings to delve deeper into who we are, who we really are, beyond all the layers of identity that get placed upon us, and therefore determine or want to determine who we should be based on those layers. And when I'm talking about layers, I mean the layers that are really biological, if you want. And I know that that's a whole other topic on its own, but based on the bodies that we come into this world in. So the body that is sexed in a particular way, that looks a particular way in terms of skin color, and how those layers can then be used to try and determine, to actually infiltrate my psyche. That's what it is. It's an infiltration of the psyche so that I am as far away distanced from figuring out and coming to a discovery of who I really am beyond all of these layers. And so my journey in this world is based on me figuring out who I am beyond these layers. And alongside that, when I work with people, it really is also around taking them on a journey of figuring out what lies beyond all of these layers that have become so important for the world to protect. What is this protection about, is what I always ask myself. Why is it so important that I am transfixed? I am made to be transfixed around my identity, body identity only, and don't get an opportunity to go beyond the body. Not excluding the body, but going beyond the body, to coming to a realization, an encounter, a sacred encounter of who I really am. The module that I'm covering on the AWLI is entitled Personal Development and Mastery. That is a pertinent module for me, where I take people, where I take delegates through a personal, courageous interrogation of who am I? This is a question that we don't often ask ourselves. We find ourselves in a situation, particularly living in the world that we live in. We find ourselves in situations where we are constantly looking outside of ourselves, looking at the world that is broken, looking at the world that is calling for help. But we ourselves do not take an opportunity to step inside of ourselves and have a look and see what's happening inside of me that may be reflected by the world outside. I take a view that what we see outside, in a lot of ways, is a reflection of what needs to be healed inside of us. And so the module really invites people to be radical, to be courageous in examining, in interrogating all the various elements that they have used to build a sense of self. And very often, that which is being used is it is based on what has been programmed into us. It's based on what has been conditioned into us through upbringing, through many years of being raised in specific families, in specific cultures, specific countries, specific religions, class, etc., etc. We use all of these determining factors to build a sense of self. But if you look at these factors, very few of them actually give space for the self to really show up in its full authentic self. What happens is that all of these external factors are narratives, are stories, are constructs that we don't actually get to examine. We don't give ourselves opportunity to fully examine. What does it mean really that I've showed up in this body in a female, I've showed up in this world in a female body? What does that really mean? Where have I derived my knowledge of what it means to be female, to be embodied, or to be a being in a black body? What does that mean really? Where have I found that information? And so in the module, we look at those questions. Where did I get this information from? And is this information in alignment with what I would like to fully experience and express in the world? Very often there is discord. And so this module really, and I said earlier that it is a courageous journey that I invite people to take. It's courageous because it means that sometimes we may discover that what we have used to build ourselves up is not the truth of who I really am. But when that happens, I celebrate because I say, yes, when I discover what is not true, that is an important beginning of a journey towards not discovering truth, but towards building the truth of who I am. And that is my passion around this work. And that is exactly what we're covering in the module. What I'm hoping the delegates take from this, what I'm inviting them to take from the module, number one, it is an ability to sit with the discombobulation, the rattling, the inner rattling that may happen from a question that gets posed of who are you and what has made you you. I am hoping that that question keeps following them back home, back to different contexts that they find themselves in, whether it is personal or professional, however way. I'm hoping that they keep asking themselves, who am I really? What is the lens that I use to look at the world? And is this lens a lens that assists me to build a world, to make a contribution into a world that is radically different from the world that we have right now? Or is it a lens that inadvertently, unintentionally cements the world, the very world that we are questioning, the very world that we are challenging, the realities, the truths, the experiences that the world that we have right now, the fights that we are engaged in? I'm tired of them, and I'm hoping that the delegates also are tired of these worlds and can imagine something completely different, radically different, even if it isn't an imagination that can be realized in this lifetime. But I think it's time for us to, to come to a sense of something else is possible. The fight, we can arrive at a point where we can put all our battles down, and we can arrive at a space of just taking deep breaths and knowing that who we are as human beings, men and women, are able to meet one another in a union that celebrates the masculine and the feminine, that is able to acknowledge beyond who we are beyond the body. So a lot of my work, my mission, has actually centered around working mainly with women, not only with women, but mainly with women. And the first reason, of course, is that I myself am a woman. I identify as a woman, and I have encountered, me as the same as many other women in the world, I've recognized the many barriers that get placed upon us, and the barriers to self-discovery, the barriers to recognizing our own inner magnificence. And I've worked with women in many leadership spaces, and leadership not only in terms of role, but leadership across the board, regardless whether a person is leading people or not. But regardless, I've recognized how many women in leadership roles struggle with what is commonly known as the imposter phenomenon, where women have a feeling, have a sense that they occupy these spaces which they do not belong in. And they occupy these roles, they are performing these roles, they are working on missions, but in spaces that are not necessarily their own spaces. They're not necessarily our own spaces. And it is devastating to see how perfectly qualified, often overqualified women undermine themselves. And the undermining comes from a long line of experiences, personal experiences, being raised in a world that says that as a woman you are inferior, and whatever it is that you have to bring into the world is always going to be interrogated. It has to be 200%, and there's no such thing, but it has to be much more fundamental. It has to be qualified. It has to be amplified and appear much bigger when it is being given, when it is being presented by a woman, compared to when it is being presented by a man. There is an automatic acceptance of male authority over female authority. And it's not just coming from men, it is coming from us as women ourselves. We undermine ourselves, we judge ourselves, we do not celebrate ourselves. And that is devastating for me. It's devastating for many reasons. And the first thing being, what world are we living in? A world that excludes the feminine. It is not a world that is in coherence. It is not a world that is in balance. What it means is that we find ourselves looking at the world, experiencing the world through a masculine lens. And it's a masculine lens. It's a masculine lens that is exclusive of female power. And I know I'm using the words feminine and masculine, feminine and female, and masculine and male interchangeably. So let me clarify that. When I'm talking about the masculine and the feminine, I'm talking about energies, I'm talking about principles that are present in all of us. But what happens when we, women, do not have a relationship with our own feminine principle inside of us? What happens to men when they are distanced from having a proper encounter and relationship with the feminine inside of them? It is a devastating loss for humanity. And so my passion, my calling is around how do I assist us humans come to coherence, come to balance with the masculine in the feminine, and bring them into integration inside of us. When we bring them into integration inside of us, the thing that happens is that when I show up as a female leader and I can tap into those energies, the feminine and the masculine energy inside of me, I show up more whole. I'm not looking outside of myself for affirmation, for recognition, but I show up knowing that I am whole, and that gives me a sense of confidence. When I show up with that sense of confidence, then I stop. I question at least that imposter that says you do not belong here. Then I can say, of course I belong here. This too is my space, and I'm here to serve.